Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because stories like this rarely get told with honesty. What you're about to hear isn't gossip, rumor, or recycled headlines. It's a deeply human story about survival, silence, and the cost of enduring pain for too long. For decades, Shania Twain stood on stages across the world singing about freedom, confidence, and independence, while carrying a private history that few people truly understood. To millions, she was strength personified. But behind the flawless performances and infectious anthems was a woman shaped by hardship long before fame ever found her. Now, at an age when most legends carefully protect their public image, Shania Twain has chosen a far more difficult path. She has chosen honesty. And what she has finally confirmed doesn't just change how we see her music. It reshapes how we understand her entire life. This is not a story about success. It's a story about survival, loss, betrayal, and the quiet courage it takes to finally speak after a lifetime of silence. Long before the world knew her as Shania Twain, she was Eileen Regina Edwards, a child growing up in the small mining town of Timmins, Ontario. This was not a place of opportunity or comfort. It was a place where survival came before dreams, and where hunger was not occasional, but routine. Food insecurity shaped her childhood in ways she rarely spoke about for years. There were mornings she went to school with nothing in her stomach, unable to concentrate, yet too ashamed to ask for help. Poverty was not just financial. It was emotional, isolating, and humiliating. Her home life offered little refuge. Though her stepfather, Jerry Twain, legally adopted her and appeared dependable from the outside, life inside the home was unpredictable and emotionally distressing. Shania learned early to read the atmosphere of a room, to sense danger without words, and to remain quiet as a form of protection. This wasn't discipline. It was fear management. As a child, she understood something most adults struggle to accept, that speaking up doesn't always make things better. Sometimes, it makes them worse. Growing up in an environment defined by instability left deep psychological marks on Shania Twain. She lived in a constant state of vigilance, always aware that peace could be shattered without warning. She later described nights spent awake, listening closely to the sounds of the house, afraid that arguments could escalate into something far worse. Certain moments stayed with her for years, convincing her she had witnessed things no child should ever see. Over time, these experiences affected how she viewed herself and her body. Boundaries were repeatedly crossed, leaving scars that weren't visible but were deeply ingrained. She began to withdraw, to hide, and to imagine safety as invisibility. This wasn't typical teenage insecurity. It was a survival instinct. Becoming smaller felt safer. Drawing less attention felt like protection. These early experiences shaped how she later approached relationships, authority, and control. Silence became a habit. Endurance became a skill. And the idea that pain should be handled alone became deeply rooted in who she was, long before the spotlight ever found her. Despite everything happening behind closed doors, Shania was expected to perform. Music was not an escape or a passion project. It was a necessity. By the age of 8, she was singing in adult-only bars to help support her family financially. These were not safe or appropriate environments for a child, but she had no choice. Night after night, she stood on stages filled with smoke, noise, and strangers, smiling as if everything was fine. She learned to compartmentalize early, separating who she was on stage from who she was at home. At the same time, her mother struggled with severe depression, sometimes unable to get out of bed for days. Shania stepped into a parental role far too young, caring for her siblings, preparing clothes, and keeping the household functioning. Childhood slipped away quietly. At just 10 years old, she wrote her first song, not about dreams or love, but about sadness. It was written for her mother, an attempt to pull her back into life. Even then, music wasn't fantasy, it was survival. This foundation of endurance, responsibility, and silence shaped everything that followed. The world would later see Shania Twain as a symbol of confidence and independence, a woman who sang boldly about self-worth and power. But what the public never saw was the child who learned early that telling the truth could tear a family apart. Silence felt safer than honesty. Keeping things inside felt like control. This mindset followed her into adulthood, into relationships, and eventually into fame. She became skilled at presenting strength while carrying unresolved pain. The applause didn't erase the past. It simply drowned it out temporarily. Each achievement became another reason not to slow down, not to look back, not to feel too deeply. Because feeling meant confronting things she had spent a lifetime avoiding. And for a long time, that strategy worked. Until it didn't. In her early 20s, just as Shania began to believe music might finally offer her a way forward, her life shattered in a single phone call. Her mother Sharon and her stepfather Jerry were killed instantly in a head-on collision with a logging truck on a remote road in northern Ontario. There was no warning, no chance for goodbyes. Grief arrived violently and without mercy, but there was no time to collapse. Overnight, Shania became the sole caregiver for her 3 younger siblings. Survival mode returned immediately. Dreams were postponed without discussion. Nashville could wait. Music could wait. Family could not. She moved back to Timmins and took whatever work she could find, including securing a long-term singing job at a resort in Huntsville, Ontario. Once again, music became a tool for survival, not ambition. She performed night after night while raising children and suppressing grief she never had space to process. For years, Shania lived a punishing routine. Perform, earn, go home, repeat. Stability came at the cost of emotional health. She later admitted that she never truly processed her parents' deaths at the time because responsibility left no room for grief. The pain was packed away alongside childhood trauma, postponed for a future moment she didn't yet know would arrive. What defined this period wasn't fame or recognition. It was resilience. She kept her siblings clothed, fed, and in school, often sacrificing her own well-being. By the time her siblings became independent enough for her to leave, she was emotionally exhausted but determined. When she finally returned to her own dream and moved to Nashville, she carried more than ambition. She carried loss, discipline, and a strength forged through survival. Rejection didn't break her, because she had already survived far worse. Meeting producer Robert, Mutt Lange felt like stability entering her life for the first time. He believed in her voice, structured her talent, and helped shape music that would redefine country pop forever. Their partnership quickly became personal, and together they built an empire of success. To the outside world, their marriage looked flawless. But beneath the surface, control slowly replaced comfort. After growing up in chaos, structure felt safe to Shania, even when it became restrictive. Lange was meticulous and dominant in production decisions. While Shania fought for creative recognition and eventually earned co-producer credit, the relationship required constant negotiation. As fame grew, so did isolation. Touring schedules were relentless. Emotional distance widened. And once again, Shania's instinct was not to confront, but to endure quietly. The betrayal that ended her marriage didn't arrive with a dramatic confession. It unfolded slowly through silence and denial. The affair involved her closest friend and assistant, someone she trusted completely. What hurt more than the betrayal itself was the refusal to acknowledge it. The unanswered questions cut deeper than the truth. When the marriage ended, Shania withdrew entirely from public life. And then something even more devastating happened. She lost her voice. Doctors struggled to explain it. Eventually, Lyme disease complications and vocal nerve damage were diagnosed. For a singer, the loss was identity-shattering. She believed she would never sing again. Years passed. 15 years without a studio album. The silence became unbearable. Without her voice, without her marriage, and without the identity she had built her entire life around, Shania spiraled. Living in Switzerland, isolated and ashamed, she reached a breaking point. At her lowest moment, she considered ending her life. What stopped her was her son. Motherhood became the anchor that pulled her back from the edge. Survival once again took priority. But this time, surviving meant facing the truth instead of running from it. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It came slowly through honesty. Writing her memoir forced Shania to confront memories she had buried for decades. She spoke openly about abuse, hunger, betrayal, and the emotional toll of lifelong silence. For the first time, she stopped protecting the image and started protecting herself. She admitted publicly that success did not shield her from pain, and that there were moments she truly wanted to disappear. Doctors eventually offered vocal surgery that required her to be awake and singing during the procedure, terrifying but necessary. The surgery left a visible scar across her neck, one she no longer hides. Recovery was slow and humbling. She had to relearn how to sing and accept a voice that would never sound the same. Control had to be surrendered. Healing required trust. At 60, Shania Twain now confirms what many whispered for years. The abuse was real. The betrayal was devastating. The loss of her voice was physical and psychological. Forgiveness was never about excusing the past, but about reclaiming peace. She has chosen distance from her former husband, not out of bitterness, but self-respect. Her later music reflects this evolution. It speaks about aging, body autonomy, fear, and freedom. She no longer hides scars. The confidence that once felt performative is now grounded and quiet. She stands in her truth, not unbroken, but unashamed. Shania Twain's legacy is no longer just measured in records sold or awards won. It lives in her decision to choose truth over silence and peace over endurance. The child who learned to disappear now stands fully seen. She didn't return to prove anything. She returned because she finally could. Her story reminds us that honesty doesn't come with age alone. It comes when survival is no longer enough. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories behind the legends.